Hello, and welcome back to our fifth Positive Solutions for Families session, Facing the Challenge, Part 1. In the last session, we discussed learning how to teach children what to do instead of engaging in challenging behavior. In this session, we will discuss specific strategies that you can use with your child every day. But before we begin, let's look at some of the activities you might have tried at home from the last session to determine the meaning of your child's behavior. What behaviors did you observe? Did the behavior look the same across observations, or were there changes? Were you able to figure out why your children do what they do? Maybe you tried to teach your child a new skill, such as the turtle tuck technique, or you read a book to your child about emotions and discussed his or her feelings using some of the new emotional vocabulary words you taught your child. If you were able to try any of these new activities, give yourself a pat on the back. You are now ready to face the challenge. Today, we are going to continue to learn strategies that you can use to help your child learn new behaviors. Please don't feel that you should attempt to use all of these at once. Take your time, think about each strategy. Choose one to try out, and then practice using that strategy until you are comfortable with it. Then you can move on. Your goal is ultimately to use these strategies in everyday life and routines without noticing where one ends and another begins. Remember that it is important to know your child's abilities and limitations. Expecting too much or too little can lead to problems and frustrations for you and your child. Keep your expectations realistic. When you consider your child's abilities and limitations, it's very important to look at the entire picture. For example, let's say you want your child to pick up his or her toys before bedtime. First, ask yourself, does my child understand what picking up your toys actually means? Have I showed my child what it means to pick up your toys? Is my child physically able to pick them up and put them where they belong? Sometimes the answers may be obvious, and sometimes you may not be so sure. Secondly, ask yourself, even when you're certain your child understands and is able, what's the history when it comes to this task in your child? Do you have to remind your child to get started? Do you need to do so more than once? More than twice? Do you find yourself getting frustrated occasionally? Perhaps more than occasionally? Reasonable expectations include not only what the child can do, but also how likely the child is to actually do it. So, what is a reasonable expectation when it comes to a desired behavior such as picking up toys? There's not a single answer that applies to all young children. But when it comes to your child's specific abilities and history, you might want to consider starting smaller and growing taller. For example, you could give a reminder followed by an immediate reminder to begin picking up toys instead of waiting for your child to remember without being reminded. What about picking up one toy for every two toys your child puts on the shelf? There's nothing wrong with lowering the expectation a bit in order to get started. In fact, that's a strategy based on an excellent evidence based approach called shaping. You will have more opportunities to acknowledge success and build from there instead of getting stuck in frustration. Logical consequences are consequences that are related to the behavior in some way. They are an alternative to punishment. Logical consequences must be practical and also enforced. Choices should be stated calmly, clearly, and respectfully. Logical consequences help guide children in learning how they are expected to behave in the real world. Let's look at a few examples. A child throws a block at his or her sister, so the parent takes the block away. This is an example of a logical consequence. Another example might be that a brother and sister are fighting. so the parent sends them to play in separate rooms. Again, this is another example of a logical consequence. Now let's try one together. Think about what you might do if your child kept dumping water out of the bathtub. One of the logical consequences would be to remove your child from the tub. Again, these are all examples of when might be a good time to use a logical consequence. Planning ahead is another strategy for your consideration. Try and anticipate what your child may do or may need in various situations. Plan ahead to set your child up for a successful experience. Hope for the best, but always have a backup plan. Planning ahead is key. Not everyone likes surprises, at least not all kinds of surprises, and almost no one enjoys disappointment. The reality is that surprises, disappointment, and uncertainty are inevitable parts of life. We can't surround our children with a protective bubble that guarantees all will go exactly as anticipated or planned. And the fact is that learning how to accept, adjust, and cope with surprises and disappointments, along with uncertainties, are all very important skills to have in life. It's just that when you are 3, 4, or 5 years old, it helps to have some extra assistance in the process. For example, we want to encourage you to give some serious thought to how your child reacts to surprises and disappointments. We can learn a lot from patterns of past behavior. Some children tend to recover quickly, while others are more likely to collapse into a complete meltdown. You may also want to talk with your child about upcoming events. Depending on your child's ability to understand, you can keep it as simple as, here's where we're going and what we're going to do. For example, you might say, we are going to walk to the park to swing on your favorite swing. Or you can be as wide ranging as discussing something that could happen and what could be done if it occurs. For example, we are going to walk to the park, and if someone is swinging on your favorite swing, we can play in the sandbox until it is our turn to swing. In any event, think ahead about what your child will need for things to go well and what your child might need if things begin to fall apart. For example, if you know your child is going to have to wait while you get a new tire put on your car, bring some toys, books, crayons, or coloring books that she or she can use in the customer lounge. Perhaps you could give the service manager your cell phone number in case you want to take your child for a walk outside. You might also want to bring a snack. Hope for a 30-minute wait, but plan for an hour. Most children are not born with a built-in ability to make decisions and then to accept the consequences. Learning to take responsibility for actions requires lots of support and practice. A good way to help your child develop these skills is to offer limited and reasonable choices throughout the day and practice them often. Here are a few examples of some choice possibilities you might be able to offer your child. Times when he or she is having dinner, cleaning up toys, riding in the car, eating at a fast food restaurant, playing with siblings, or reading a story. You might even be able to think of other examples that pertain specifically to your day. In trying to offer your child limited and reasonable choices, let's now look at a few examples. If you asked your child, do you want French fries, mashed potatoes, or tater tots with dinner tonight? Is this a reasonable and limited choice? Yes, this is an example of a limited and reasonable choice. Now let's look at the next example. What do you want to wear today? Do you think this is a limited or reasonable choice? Do you think there might be a better way to offer this choice to your child? Perhaps instead of asking it this way, you might want to rephrase the question to say something such as, do you want to wear your red shirt or your blue shirt today? This is a good example of a limited and reasonable choice. I think you've got the idea so far. So now, here's a second element to consider. What should you do if your child decides that neither choice is that appealing or wants to change his or her mind after making a choice? Our recommendation is that in almost all instances, you should stick with your original offer. With the choosing clothes example, you can say, that's a pretty shirt too, but today's choice is either your red shirt or your blue shirt. Maybe you can choose your yellow shirt tomorrow. Another strategy you can use with your child is to say the word first when teaching your child new behaviors. For example, first you put on your shoes, then you can go outside. A first then statement is a simple instruction that tells your child what to do in order to do something that he or she wants to do. A first then statement is known as a contingency statement. Here are some more examples of a first then statement. First, you pick up your toys. Then you can have a snack. Or, first you finish getting dressed. Then you can play outside. The basic guidelines when using contingency statements are: have a positive focus, set reasonable time limits, follow through, and be prepared for your child's response. It may be a no. If the response is no, it is important to be consistent and not allow the then to happen. Parents can provide guidance to children when they are misbehaving by redirecting them as a prevention strategy. A parent can interrupt a challenging behavior and redirect a child to another activity using either physical or verbal redirection. Let's talk about these two strategies. A physical redirection interrupts the child's challenging behavior and re-engages the child in a more appropriate activity. For example, a child is playing in the sink and splashing water all over the bathroom. The parent might choose to physically move the child away from the sink and over to some toys in the child's room. Once at the toys, the parent could then sit down on the floor near the toys and begin to play in a way that is inviting to the child. A verbal redirection distracts the child and provides a different activity. For example, a child might be trying to gain the attention of a parent who is on the telephone with an important call. Another adult might then say to the child something like, "Hey, let's go upstairs and read some of your new library books together." Or, another example of verbal redirection is if a child is upset and throws a temper tantrum because he was asked to turn off the television. The parent could redirect the child by saying, "Wow, it is so beautiful outside. I feel like going to the park to play." Redirection can also be used to prompt a child to use an appropriate new skill. For example, if a child begins to have a tantrum because he or she is frustrated with putting a toy together, the parent might say to the child, "Evan, you can say, 'Help, please.'" Evan says, "Help, please," and the parent then puts the toy together for him. Another example is if a toddler begins to fuss while sitting in her high chair after finishing dinner. The parent could say, "Olivia, you can say, 'All done,' using the sign language sign for 'all done' while speaking." Olivia then signs, "All done," and the parent helps her get down from her high chair. It is important to follow through when redirecting or directing your child. So if your child has difficulty complying or following your directions, you should do WOP. This is an acronym for stating the do direction, then wait for compliance while silently counting to 5. Ask the child to restate the direction, then wait for compliance again while silently counting to 5, and then provide encouragement or help. Helping will ensure your child's success. When you see your child doing something good or that you would like to see, give specific, positive attention to the behavior. When you see a behavior that you would like to see again, encourage it. You don't have to make a great big deal about it, just acknowledge it. Tell your child you appreciate it. For example, you might say something like, "Wow, you are being so careful keeping all of the pieces on the table. Great job." When a child's behavior is challenging, you can either respond to it or ignore it. If reaction is necessary, remember that less is usually best. Acting calmly with a minimum of attention will reduce the risk of strengthening the very behavior you wish to discourage. Remaining calm will also give you time to think about how you want to respond. The more out of control your child becomes, the more self-control you need to use. We want you to model desired behavior for your child. When you remain calm, your child learns appropriate ways to respond to difficult situations. Our final strategy we will talk about today is we'd like to encourage you to consider using neutral time. Neutral time can occur before or after your child's behavior. When your child is calm and you are calm, it is neutral time. The best time to talk is when everybody is ready to listen. We have covered a lot of material in this session on parenting strategies to deal with behavior problems. We hope that you will be able to use these strategies successfully at home every day. You may want to make a list of 3 of the strategies we discussed today that you will try and use this week with your child to support appropriate behaviors and help prevent challenging behaviors. And don't forget to use positive comments and encouragement for those behaviors you do want to see. Thank you very much for tuning in, and be sure to look for our final Positive Solutions for Families session coming soon on ways to support your child with regard to changing specific behavior problems.